Right, well, we've still got snow here, and when I was a kid, I used to enjoy playing in it. But now I'm a bit older, I'm still going to play in it. What I'm going to do is, it's so dark in here now, look. Now look at that, that's all full of snow up there. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a game which is an adult's game really, I guess. But maybe it is just a child's game. I'm going to start all my cars up. Now none of these cars have been running for a while, some of them for a fair while. But we've got this really cold weather. We have had about -5 last night, I suppose. Well, that's not cold for really, but it is cold for England. So we'll start the cars up, let them run, and see if they all start. Now the Jag is the car I had a problem with a few days ago when the battery was flat. So we'll see whether that starts up. I'm not going to get in it fully because I've got snow on my boots, but this should start, I hope. Oh yeah, good girl. Right, that's right. We'll leave that running. Now, this is my Dodge, and this is the old 6-volt car. Still waiting for Andy to come and fit this and sort that out, but I'll have to forgive him with all this weather. Right, so we'll pull the choke out here, which is very stiff. Right, that's pulled out and it's staying out. Turn the ignition on. Now the thing with this car is that until the fuel is pumped up by the mechanical pump to the carburetor gets into the engine, it will never fire. So, you know, we'll see what happens. Well, at least the battery's still active. Actually, now that is, oh, that's turning over quite quick actually for this car. So I'm pumping it a bit here, trying to encourage this fuel up, and I'm confident that it will start as soon as it has some fuel. Well, it's either that or the battery running out first. No, but we did fire. Probably going to flood it now because it fired. So that's a slightly different situation, I think, because we've obviously got fuel up there, and but because it's cold, I guess it's just doesn't want to start, and it will flood. So I think we'll start pumping. We'll just turn it over. Nearly there. Well, the cold has got to this car, but we'll end up actually flooding it now and running the battery down, so I think we'll have a battery charger on this probably tonight. Right, what we'll do is we'll leave this one for a minute and we'll try one of the others. That just started up, right. Right, there's a turn of this little, get the snow off my boots. Okay, so we've got a choke down here. Pull that out. Now this car is a slow starter on a warm day, so what's going to happen now. And it hasn't been running for a while. So, in a scale of what do I hope, this is pretty low on the that scale. Right. There again, the battery at least is turning it over at the moment. I'm not so hopeful for this car, frankly. And no, I'm going to stop that because we've got the battery running down already. So this is another car that needs a battery charger on it. I think that's what I'm going to do tonight. So I think I'm going to put the battery charger on this car tonight. That's not going to start. I'll just run that battery down. So make sure that's turned off. Yep. Right, so we'll leave that. That was not good. Right. Get rid of the snow on my boots. Right, well this one I'm a bit more hopeful about. It's not a particularly good starter normally, but it's better than the Amy. So we've got the choke pulled straight out. And, yep, we're in neutral. Right. Well, that's more hopeful, isn't it? Or is it? These guys want to start, but they're just... Okay. Push the choke back into about a third. See the lights on there where the choke is. That's just... Oops, no. Usually, you put it more than... You put it up to around half choke, it stalls it again. If you turn it off now, it'll stall. But with just a little bit of choke, about a third way up, it will keep running. In fact, it'll probably keep running. I'll leave that. So we'll let this run for a bit. Right, it's very cold today now. We'll try the Mercedes. So it's a bit dark in here. Now, of course, there's no chokes, nothing to do on these cars. You just turn the key. There we go. Turn the radio off. Well, that's just started as normal, really. Slight second delay instead of instant. That's just running nicely. No trouble at all. So I think we'll just let that run. Let's go back and try the Dodge again. Well, the Volvo's here, but I think that's not a problem because that... Well, the Jag sounds nice. Right, well the Dodge looks nice. It did fire. I'm sure what's happened is it flooded. So I think what we'll do is we'll get the chokes out, turn the ignition on. I won't pump the petrol at all. Just see what happens now. It fired, didn't it? Because what it wants is some gas. So. Right. Let's get this choke in. Now it likes the choke normally to be pushed in almost immediately it starts. In fact, it won't run. Once you start it, it seems to need some choke to start, but as soon as it fires and gets running, this choke, you need to push it back. Now it's running really smooth actually, so that's actually lovely. So now this car's got I don't know, some people don't know about these, but these are hand throttles. Right, so what we'll do is we'll rev it a little bit, pull this, right, okay. So I'm not touching the throttle now, a bit more. That's me letting it die. Right, hand throttle. No. Right, I'm not touching it. So I've got the hand throttle out, and that's holding the revs up. Right, it's a bit too fast. I want to turn it down, but it's dying as soon as I pushed it a bit. See, I only touched that a little bit. It made a big difference. That was a couple of millimeter. And the engine revs drop right down. Because these big engines, obviously, they take so long to warm up. I didn't really want it to run that fast at this point, but it won't run otherwise. I'm going to let this carry on. The trouble, of course, with these cars with dynamos, that they take so long to charge the battery, and they have to be running at high revs, because when they're running at low revs, they're only really creating enough charge to run the engine. If you start putting things on, indicators, lights and what have you, they're not really a tick over there. They're not even hardly producing enough power to run those things. So I haven't got anything turned on, and the only thing that is running is the spark plugs. And I guess that's probably why they had a hand throttle, because, you know, when you start these cars up when they were cold, especially in the winter maybe, you had to have them running at high revs like this to be able to charge up or put a bit more charge in than it was taking out. I know in Canada in the winter when I was a kid, that my dad had cars like these, and or everyone did obviously, they would leave them running outside the house for ages. They'd have to just leave them running. And they'd be running at revs like this, higher revs. So, the only car that we didn't get going was the little Amy. Of course, that's the one car that I haven't really driven for a while, because there was so much mud in that area to get it out for the last couple of weeks. I couldn't drive it. So that battery, I got a 12-volt battery that I used on this Jag the other day. So I will put that Amy on charge overnight. Right, so we'll let this run for a bit. Go around and check the others. Right, well, this is running okay. Very quiet car, you can't hear it at all. Right, I don't know. Kick the snow off. Should we give this another go? Stupid, but we will. Let's see what happens here. Okie doke. Ah, that sounded a bit better. Oh, nurse it, nurse it, nurse it. Ah, hang on. Oh, I didn't have the choke in. I pushed it. That started without the choke, that's why. Okay, so now I got the choke out a bit. Right, so this is running. That's good. Very cold though. Right, so of course these cars have got, obviously they're air cooled, so there's no water to worry about. They don't have a heater blower. There is one fan on them that runs all the time. Obviously that's the fan that runs on a shaft from the engine in the front of the engine, so that's blowing cold air on the engine, and then when the engine's warm, that air is utilized with heat exchanger from exhaust, so all that heat is then put up a cardboard tubes and comes out into the cabin for heat. So of course the airflow is only the airflow from the fan that cools the engine. So when the engine is revving fast and you're driving along, you're getting a better airflow, obviously, than when you're idling, you're getting very little. Cardboard tubes in the engine, which are a factor in terms of car fires here, because you know they get old, they sag, they touch, and there are a lot of cases where 2CVs or these type of cars get fires, have engine bay fires, and that's because these cardboard tubes sag and catch fire in the engine bay. That seems to be running smoothly now. Right, I've got the choke about the same as the 2CV. It's at about a third. At the moment it's running well, so I think we'll leave this, go back and have a look at the 2CV, see how that's getting on. Well, I'm a kid at heart, and I'm going to try this. Right, so what do we got? This is the starter button. It's got a choke actually, which is this here, that lever there. So we turn the ignition on, it's in neutral, and the ignition is on, gone out there. And put the choke on a bit, push the starter button. Give it a bit of throttle. It's very difficult here. Hang on a minute. I've only got two hands. That's better. Oops. Ticking over and just leave it. I've turned the choke on. Normally we never use the choke on this thing. Start. I can tell it as soon as I'm letting that throttle ease off at the moment, it's actually stalling. Well, I'm just going to have to get this warmed a little bit before it'll tick over on its own happily. As I say, that choke cable is a bit stiff because we hardly ever use it. I mean, it never needs a choke to start. I only used it today because it was so cold. These bikes were amazing, and this one we've had this ATV for probably at least 25 years, and I can probably count on one hand the number of times we ever serviced it. We use it almost exclusively now for just running the dogs, big dog teams. And as we don't have so many occasions to do that now, it doesn't get that much use, to be honest with you. We did service it about 4 or 5 months ago, which probably was the first time it was serviced in a couple of years. Right, that's ticking over normally, and the choke is off, so we'll leave that to run for a bit. The Amy's running alright, and that's interestingly, that's got a side exhaust. I mean, that's the way it came from the factory. Of course, they did these side exhausts. Their idea was obviously that when you were standing at the back of the car lifting up the tailgate, you didn't have exhaust fumes coming into you. But then, of course, you had exhaust fumes when you were getting in the car there, so I don't know. That car's running all right. Let's have a look at the 2CV. Right, well, put the choke in on this. Right, well, I know you can't feel it, but the cabin's fairly warm. Choke's in and the revs have dropped right down. It's ticking over normally. This went in for a service at Anglian Vehicle Services a couple of weeks ago, and they set the carburetor up a little bit, running a little bit quicker than Ben had done it. Right, well, as we've got some snow here, we might as well just do the other thing. These are 2 sleds. I think I've talked about these before anyway. They're both there again about 20, well, they're more than 20 years old. They're 25 years old at least. One of them was made in Canada and one was made in the UK. So this was made in Canada, and this was the Canadian one that we bought and had it shipped over from Canada. And this one was a copy that was made in the UK by a friend of mine who made canoes. So what we'll do is we'll take the Canadian one out and we'll try it on the snow. Well, right, I'm just pushing it now. See, that slides pretty good. Slides really well. So what we've got here is we've got these polypropylene, I think that's what it's called, runners, and they really slide good. We've got flexing sled. It's a racing sled, so it does flex, and we've got a brake which is pretty good. That's quite a good brake. I mean, that digs into the ground or into the ice. You've got a bed here, and there is actually it's not really for a passenger, it's for in terms of racing, it's there's a big bag here, a dog bag, and if you've got an injured dog, you put the dog in the bag, and it's designed for a dog. And it zips up and its head sticks out and tied in, the dog sits in there. This is the toe sort of thing on it, so that it's not jerking when the dog's teams are pulling. There's a bit of flex. That's pretty good design, you can see all that. This is called a brush bone, that's so you don't run into the dogs. That's the name of the kennel, or the guy that built this. Chatmac. I think this was in eastern Canada, but maybe wrong. I can't remember now. So it looks good in the snow though. Right, so there's less wind in here. The wind on the camera, the noise. Yeah, so of course, when you're on a sled, you know your feet are slippery, icy. You've got snow and everything, and you're trying to jump on and off. In a lot of cases, of course, you'd be running, and then you're jumping back on these. And at that time, you know, the dogs might be going 20 miles an hour even. Of course, what you would do is you'd have a rope around your waist. You've got a hook as well, and you'd be hooked onto another rope, which you'd be hooked to this sled, so that obviously if you slipped and fell, you wouldn't be separated from the dogs and the team, so you'd be dragged along, and then of course, you know, you'd be dragged, but you'd manage to maybe stop because you could grab onto a tree. Your body would create so much drag the dogs might stop, hopefully, and then you'd get back on. But it would be a foolish guy who would not be tied to the sled, because normally you lose a dog team, certainly in a race, they've gone. You know, obviously these guys who were trapping, or these guys who were just doing transporting, their teams were just walking along really, and they were probably so well trained that they would stop on command. But certainly in racing, where the dogs are not, well, they're trained not to stop, they basically have got it in their brain, which is how we train them, that once they start a race, they don't stop till they reach the finish. And no way of shouting at them to stop will actually do anything, and they just go faster the more you shout. So, okay, that's enough of sleds. Oh, God, it's cold out there. The Mercedes is running. Well, it's just lovely, isn't it? Beautiful. Right, we'll turn that off. Let's have a little run. It's nice and warm in here. We'll go back out into the cold. Right, well, this has had a little tick over for a while. Oh, it's beautiful and warm in here. Turn that off. Well, it's a noisy little spot here. This is running all right. I think I'll take that out in a minute. This is running okay. Put the choke in. Right, we'll come back, turn that off in a minute. Right, well, the Jag is running. You can't hear it, but the noise is the Dodge. We'll turn this off. Right, well, put the hand throttle down, see if it ticks over. Right, that's running lovely, absolutely lovely. That's really quiet, smooth. It's not vibrating or anything, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's such a good car, and I think it's 70 years old. It's over 70 years old now. It's amazing. Amazing car. Right. We'll shut that down. Okay. Right. So we'll let this stop now. It's nice and warm in here. The heater does work. Right. So at least they all started. Right, well, that's ticking over really well. It's warm in here, so even on tick over now it's been giving some heat. Sounds nice. I should be taking this car out as soon as the weather's warm again, the roads are dry. Give it a good clean and take it out. It's a really nice car. I didn't use it much, I must admit, this last year. Because of course I'm busy buying other cars, that Daimler and the Aventime, and but the two cars I think I'm going to drive a little bit more now, this one and the Jag. This one, you know, I used to drive this a lot. I used to drive this almost every day. It was really my sort of daily driving car. Before that had been the Mercedes, and then I decided to try and keep the Mercedes. Mileage was going a bit too high, and I decided to drive this one. This one's such an easy car to drive. It's really fun and it's useful, and I've been some long distances in it. Been on some, sort of journeys, 100 miles, 150 miles, which, quite good. It runs really well. And this one, you can travel on the motorway with it, the highway. It'll cruise at around 60 without any real problem. And even though it's heavier than the 2CV, it's got a slightly more powerful version of the same engine, and it will sort of hold its speed around the high 50s to 60s, unless you're going up a really steep hill. So it is quite useful on the motorway. And you can wind it up above 60. I mean, you can get nearly to 70 really on it, but and it'll drive on the flat like that once it winds up. But I tend to drive around 60 on it. Anyway, we'll turn this off. Right, now we'll take the little ATV out. Right, so you can see where all the animals have been, and there's been a hare. It looks like a hare to me. It's been running around, and you can see where he's been getting through an area in the fence up here. If I can find it again, yeah, here. Right, well I'm going to go out in the Mercedes now, and I was just looking at that washer at the back, and the washer, look, you can see it, that's working. That's good. I thought they'd be frozen. I wonder if the front one is. Yeah. It's amazing. It's buried in snow, and yet they're working. Oh dear. That's good. Yeah, really impressive. Anyway, we'll see how the Mercedes goes in the snow. Right, well, we're out in a snowy weather here. This is looks like Canada, doesn't it? Now, you know, this is I think one of the deceiving things. So driving in, and anyone, excuse me, because anyone who's in North America or anywhere will know exactly this, but I mean, just you know, driving in this sort of virgin snow, as it were, where the car is packing down. I mean, you've got road tires, that's a big problem, but anyway. Where you're driving in this snow, the car will drive reasonably well, and the problem is, of course, as it's packed down by the continual driving of cars, it becomes a solid lump of ice. And whilst it's even reasonable driving, the problem is when you stop. And even with ABS, you know, and 20 miles an hour, you'd be surprised how a car will just keep sliding. So if you keep your speed down, at least you've got some chance. And the biggest problem is other cars, because you can drive along like this reasonably well. But if somebody is driving too fast, coming towards you on a bend or whatever, and they drive into you, this is the real problem. So now this car will come into its own, obviously, if you need to pull away on a hill in this, because the four-wheel drive will engage. And it works really well, actually. So we're actually on the hill now, so yeah, there we go. That came on really good. I mean, I wasn't revving much. Now, in straightforward two-wheel drive, that would have been much more difficult, just pulling away on that hill. The back slid around a bit, but the front wheels engaged, and they would have gone up to 40% pull, and probably what happens is that if it continues, this all happens very quickly, obviously, the diff locks at the back. Now, one of the other problems with a car like this, and I found it out to my displeasure, I might say, is when I pulled over slightly onto the curb or the edge of the road in snow like this, and of course I bottomed out, because you don't know what's underneath that snow, and there's no road clearance to speak of. So that's another problem with a car like this. So it's not an off-road vehicle whatsoever. So once you go off the road and there is you got the chance of bottoming out, you're in trouble. So I'd bottomed out, and all the wheels were driving, but of course it wouldn't drag me off. I had to get Bennicks. Fortunately, actually, I wasn't too far away from Bennicks at the time, and I managed to get them on the phone. There again, in modern times, we got phones, and they came and pulled me out. There's a video of that actually on YouTube. Now I can feel the car sliding already. Now if I brake, look at that. Light braking, and the ABS came on and it was sliding. So there's nothing on these roads. I mean, there's no grit, there's no sand, nothing at all. And frankly, I'm not sure that I would want to come on this road without at least the minimum, which is this four-wheel drive system, because whilst it's not going to help me this in thick snow or drifting, because and I've got very low clearance, at least it will pull me out of pull me away from situations where I'm on a hill or something. And it's amazing. It looks lovely here. I think it looks bleak. It looks good. I think I like this. It's a bit of a taste, perhaps, of what I'm going to see in a few weeks when I'm off to Canada. I'm going to Alberta for 3 weeks. So, here we go. We're going to go around this little road here that goes up and downhill. And it is not going to be a problem here, but what you hoping is that we don't meet up with somebody, because there's very little areas to pull in. There's a couple of pull-ins and it's difficult to find them. Here we are in a corner, so if we meet something, we don't really want to slide off this road. A fellow was telling me back in the 60s, possibly it was in 63 when they had the big snow, this road was completely blocked with snow, and him and some other guys who were working, now this is the funny part of the story, he was working in what is now the boarding kennel, the ex-boarding kennel that I'm developing for houses. That was a farm, and he worked as a young lad in that farm. He's actually a plumber, and he's going to be working for me on this project. That's a funny connection. But anyway, back in the 60s, he was a young lad, and he worked in that, and it was a farm. And this road here was completely blocked with snow, and they couldn't get up here to get food for the some animals that were up here, cattle, I suppose. They started to dig along this road at the far end where we came in there, and eventually they couldn't make it. They had to get a helicopter drop with some bales of straw, I guess, for the cattle. I think that probably was the 63 winter, which was pretty fierce. But of course, I mean, if there was drifting here, we wouldn't get through in this car, obviously. But there are tractors at the moment running back and forth, so they're sort of packing all this down. There's one of these cambers, which is the wrong way, and on a slidey road. Take it easy. And I might sound as if I'm being over cautious here, but all this what's come to mind is in the last few days when I've been thinking about Canada when I was a kid. And I remember, I used to sit on my dad's lap in one of his old cars, and we used to drive around these roads like this, snow in the prairie, and he'd be telling me how to drive a car. See, sort of the four-wheel drive cut in there, look. Look at that, woo. See, with the four-wheel drive cutting in that, that's bad. Anyway, yeah, my dad used to sort of, it made a big impression on me. He kept telling me how to drive in the snow. This was the estate that used to belong to the Rothschild family. The car's sliding around. It's pretty slippery there. That was pretty slippery. The car almost went ice skating there. Right, so we come to another slippery bit here. Ooh, look at that. Right, that's just ice here. The car won't even stay still. So we're just, now I'm not even driving it, I'm just letting it go on its, this is all because we've got the wrong tires really. Now, what I should be doing is what I normally preach, and that is putting at least cable ties around the tires, because they do give a lot of grip. They make a hell of a difference. They're a useful thing to keep in your car in the winter, because on roads like this you put a whole load of cable ties around the wheels, and they will help you really well. Right, so we're coming down to a bit of a slippery slope here. We'll just take it easy and get down to another road, which is, so there we can put the brakes on and the ABS cuts in. The tractors have been down here and they've pushed all that snow to the side. Right. Actually, I'd rather be driving on the other stuff, I guess, because now I got grit on here. I've got horrible muck going up underneath my Mercedes. I think what I'm going to do is, as soon as the weather warms up, I'm going to get this car to up on a ramp and get it jetted, cleaned out underneath. What I did last year was, when it was drying out, really dry, I got up underneath it with the high pressure air hose, and I blasted out the mud from all the crevices. Right, well, it looks like the road to Bennicks has been gritted, because it's certainly clear of snow. It's actually drying out in places. Obviously this is a favoured route that the council, local council have decided to keep clear. Now whether they're open doesn't look too good. I don't think they are. No, there's nobody here. No. No, they're not open. No, they're all shut up. Right, so we will just have to do a round robin route now somewhere else and go home a different route for a change, I think. Right, well, it's all very picturesque here. Lovely house there, isn't it? England, well, a lot of countries, but I mean, it looks nice in the winter as well here. Picturesque buildings. So at this point here, we've got a choice. We could go the long way around and turn right, and that will give us a route that's, I assume, is mostly gritted and dry, or we can go the snowy route, which is what we'll take as a shorter route. I had a few years ago, I had a Jeep Wagoneer, an older one. It was an 82, I think, and that had really big chunky tires on it, really off-road stuff really, and I think there's a video on YouTube of me driving it in the snow on roads like this, but that was really good. But of course that was it wasn't like this thing in the sense, because it was a two-wheel drive vehicle, and then of course you put it into four-wheel drive. You stopped, you put it into four-wheel drive, and then it drove in four-wheel drive. It wasn't a vehicle that you drove every day in four-wheel drive. This one drives as a two-wheel drive, but it automatically engages the four-wheel drive on its own. But in the Jeep, of course, you know, like the old Land Rovers, you put it into that mode, that four-wheel drive mode. But it was good. Now, diverted traffic. I don't want to go that way. Oh well, we'll go this way. We'll see what happens. So we'll try braking while there's no one around. You can hear that ABS system, and we'll put our foot down. Right, well, it's sliding about a bit, but four-wheel drive was kicking in, and I didn't really make any adjustments with the steering. I just let the car go on its own, and it was fairly good. You know, if it had just been strictly the rear wheels working there, that car would have snaked around. But because it had that degree of pulling from the front as well kick in, it stayed pretty steady. I mean, that is just the attribute of this car, is that these conditions are really what it was designed to do. You know, on a road with no ground clearance required, and driving at these sort of speeds, and the four-wheel drive will engage as necessary, and you should be able to make good progress. So I'm kind of fairly confident driving this around, because it's all flat, and you know, the vehicle's not going to get this extra momentum from gravity. Nothing coming around that corner, so we're okay. There's a sharp right turn at the end here, just past that tree on the right, and a little hill. I mean, it's pulling through this snow, no problem. Considering the tires, it's amazing. I'm not really touching the throttle. It's just car's just driving itself. But I'll give it a bit of power here and see what happens when we go around this hill. The little hills here, so we're going to go around to the right. Four-wheel drive kicks in. Nothing coming, right. Well, that's no problem at all. I mean, a slight adjustment on the steering there, where it was sliding a bit, but the car was then pulling into the slide, so that was okay. We'll try it again. We'll put the braking on. We'll brake a little harder. Right. That's. I mean, that was a good example. Now I was full on braking, so I was doing about. Oops. I was doing about 15 miles an hour, if that, and I braked really hard, and the car just kept going. ABS was kicking in. So, you know, people who drive along here at 25, maybe 30 miles an hour are absolutely mad, in my view. I mean, obviously, there's nothing coming, but if you want to stop suddenly, you've no hope. Now, down the end here, we are going to turn right, and there is a slope going downhill, and that's more of a problem. So we'll just let the car gently go down there. So we'll lift off the throttle in a minute now and let the car just glide. Alright, I've kicked it down into a lower gear. This is an automatic, but it's down in a lower gear. We'll just let the car drive itself down here. So I'm not touching the throttle now, and it's in low of automatic, I mean. Just give it a little bit of power now. You know, this is sounding like I'm giving lessons, and I'm not trying to teach grandmother how to suck eggs, as they say, and I really feel a bit of an idiot, but it's, you know, just telling you really what I'm going through my mind, because all the time I'm driving as well, I'm thinking of what's in the curb, because I'm thinking to myself, you know, if something was to suddenly come around a corner here, and I had to brake, or I had to stop quickly, that I'd aim the car at the curb, because that is obviously in most cases, the best way to slow the car down, stop, is to hit into that curb. So I'm always mindful of what the curb is, watching ahead and the corners. So I'm driving the car and thinking a lot differently in this sort of these conditions. Right, so we'll turn into my new driveway. Just drive down this bit here. This will be a lovely drive in the summer when all the trees have come out and we've planted a few more. So that was exciting. Right, there we are. Safe and sound.